Hello everyone, I'm Samana Abed and I'm founder of Cymru Trust, and I'm truly honored and thankful to all the people who came today. As the name is Empower, is to empower our community, our wills, our people. And thanks very much, Professor Nash. You are doing an incredible job. Your innovation and this product is magical, and we really want our people to stay healthy. And special thanks to Eric, our trustee.
Hi there, I'm Eric Robinson. I am a trustee of Empower Cymru Trust. The trust was set up by Sam just under 2 years ago, and the reasons for doing this is to help small businesses locally and empower them to greater things.
In this video, you will see the benefits of amino honey and how it is important in your health, in your lifestyle. So please check it.
Empower Cymru Trust are here to support Iminu Honey. I have a job pronouncing it, but perhaps I could hand over to Professor Robert Nash, please, for a discussion.
Well, thank you very much for coming today. It's a pleasure to be able to show you our laboratories and our offices and talk a bit about our research, in particular on amino honey. We work on a lot of different products, finding new molecules, and it's really very exciting that we can find new molecules that have health benefits.
Absolutely. That sounds absolutely fascinating. The amino honey is one we've discussed before, but could you just outline what's happened over the last 20 odd years since you found the molecule, which is unique?
Well, it's a very long story. I mean, a lot's gone on. We first of all found the molecule in a plant from Western Samoa. Then we discovered it also occurred in a plant outside the laboratory in Aberystwyth.
It's amazing.
Which made it much easier for us to get large quantities of the molecule to determine what it did. And the original claim for the plant from Western Samoa was it could cure cancer. So we purified more of the molecule from Aberystwyth and showed, sure enough, in laboratory studies and mouse studies, it does have a very strong anti-cancer activity by activating the immune system. So since then, we've done a lot more work on the chemistry, seeing how specific the molecule structure has to be, and it has to be very precise. So nature's found the right molecule.
Yeah.
If you change it, you lose the activity. And it's moving forward quite slowly as a pharmaceutical, which is really where we want to go, because it's very new. It's not like anything else out there. If it's like something else, it can go to production and come on the market very fast. But this is a very new molecule working in a new way, and therefore it takes a lot longer to actually show how it works and get it approved.
Am I right in thinking that you've got a patent on this particular item, which makes it unique, which other honey products don't do? I mean, I've got friends who are taking the honey, and they've reported amazing benefits. So simple as not getting colds, which they used to be. So it works on animals as well, and I've heard wonderful things about cures for dogs and so on. I know you can't claim that, but it is important that people know anecdotally how efficient it is, because it is fantastic.
Particularly for the veterinary market, but people can take it as well. It's just a honey naturally containing a molecule which the bees put in there.
Yeah.
So we're just measuring the molecule, selecting the batches which have the high level of the molecule. And it's been very interesting with the animals, as you say, particularly dogs, but also horses.
Horses?
With sarcoids, which is a type of skin cancer which can affect horses. But in dogs and horses, it can really have dramatic
It's amazing.
effects, because very often the owners don't want to put them through chemotherapy, radiotherapy, this type of thing. Whereas with people, we don't want to stop people having those treatments.
No.
So they can take it alongside those other treatments. It doesn't have a negative effect.
It's amazing.
That's the nice thing about the molecule we discovered. There's no toxic effects,
No.
which makes it very different from many cytotoxic agents, the chemotherapies, which can be quite damaging to the health of the people themselves. So this can be used alongside other treatments and make them more effective, we think.
Absolutely.
But in the long run, we want to develop the molecule, because the doctors will never like prescribing a honey for treating a serious illness. But if we can get the molecule through all the tests and processes that have to be done, then we can get the compound on the market as a very new type of cancer drug with no negative effect.
we're so lucky we've got you here in Aberystwyth. And I mean, you're top of your game. This is really quite phenomenal with amazing or life-changing benefits.
We find new molecules all the time which other labs don't find, partly because there aren't so many labs doing plant chemistry work like us anymore. A lot of them used to be run at universities, and a lot of them have closed. I mean, there's virtually no one in the UK doing plant discovery work, so everyone tends to just measure the same things, the well-known things like the antioxidants, the amino acids, the vitamins. They're measured all the time, but interesting new molecules and new activities are not found very often. Looking for new molecules in plants, which is really our speciality. We're looking for new drugs, new medicines, and also trying to work out why foods are healthy. What is it in them that makes them healthy? So in the past, people used to think you had to go to tropical countries to find interesting new molecules. And there are many examples of new drugs that came from tropical plants. But in fact, what we discovered was you don't have to go very far. You can just go to the fields around Aberystwyth, the shops like Morrison's and Tesco, and still find interesting new molecules in plants that really have been ignored for many decades. Which is a mistake because analytical techniques have improved considerably, and you can find lots of molecules now that people just couldn't find 30, 40 years ago. So, for example, we found that potatoes contained new molecules which no one knew was there before. So we found these types of compounds that look a bit like sugars in potatoes, and we thought, well, that's strange. Why has no one else reported them? So we spoke to the government scientists and said, do you know about these molecules? And they said, no one's told us about them. They said, we pay some labs every year to do analysis of potatoes. Why haven't they told us about them? And it just shows that a lot of people just look for the same things over and over again. So they were doing the starch analysis, the vitamins, the amino acids, and they completely missed this new group of molecules that actually can help to regulate blood sugar levels. And each potato variety was different.
Wow.
So it shows that there's a lot of variation even in the foods we eat, and which variety you eat can make a big difference to how healthy it may be in the diet. So interestingly, potatoes can help reduce blood sugar even though they're high in sugars, because these molecules actually stop you utilising the sugars effectively. So that was a really interesting new discovery from a plant that everyone had really ignored for many decades in terms of being a source of interesting new molecules. And then of course around Aberystwyth we have lots of bluebells at the moment. It's April. Bluebells are in bloom in the wood here, the Plain Glice woods. And bluebells we found contain lots of interesting molecules as well. In fact, an incredibly high number, around 60 odd new molecules, none of which have been synthesized or identified before. And many of these have very interesting biological activities as well, and that's probably why nothing eats bluebells, why they're actually left alone in the woodland, because they're essentially toxic. But if you take each of these molecules out and look at them individually, some of those may well have health benefits. As a mixture, they inhibit lots of different enzymes in the body, but individually they may have some benefits, and you can then produce perhaps a medicine from these molecules in bluebells, not necessarily by using bluebells, but by synthesizing the molecule. And we work very closely with organic chemists at Oxford University and Bangor to produce the molecules which we spot in nature. And very often finding a molecule in nature gives the organic chemist the idea of, oh, that's an interesting molecule, we'll try and make it. So even these very small molecules, many of them had not been synthesized before we found them in bluebells. But the interesting thing then is when we thought about bluebells, we thought, well, what's related to bluebells that also grows in Wales? And we thought of Sylvaverna, which grows on the coasts around West Wales. And this contains also lots of interesting novel molecules, but they're different from the bluebell ones. So it's a related plant, produces a completely different set of molecules which are related but not the same. So this plant was used traditionally for treating respiratory infections in Wales, but stopped being used when antibiotics and other drugs came along. But you would have found it in pharmacists 100 years ago, 150 years ago on the shelf as a tincture or extract.
Wow.
And it probably has interesting molecules that affect the ability of the microorganisms to actually form their cell walls properly. So, for example, it can inhibit potentially tuberculosis from growing by stopping the mycobacterium producing its cell wall correctly, stopping it being able to grow, and also making the immune response to it more effective as well.
It's fascinating.
So there are lots of interesting new molecules in plants which are very familiar to us, which just haven't been analysed in great detail for a long time. And then you can go to things like rice. We found a new molecule in rice, but it's only in some types of rice.
Wow.
Ooh.
So it tends to be in basmati, but some basmati have more than others. And we were led on to this by one of our staff members who reads Cosmopolitan and all these types of things. And in one of these magazines it said that some basmati rice were better for you than others because you put on less weight. So this was like an anecdotal claim. So she said, can I analyse some basmati rice and see whether there's anything in there? And sure enough, basmati rice contained a new molecule which can help to control blood sugar levels. So this anecdotal claim about some rice being better for you turned out to be true. And again, we managed to get a patent on that molecule for measuring it in certain types of rice. So we're doing projects now working with basmati rice producers, for example, this one from India, and we'll determine which basmatis are better than others. And there may be a way they can actually get extra value for their rice and better health benefits for their customers by measuring the molecule that controls your blood sugar levels. Looking at cucumbers. So you'd again think that cucumbers have been very well studied, but what you find is there are around 4,000 varieties of cucumbers, and some of them contain a molecule which we discovered as a new molecule from cucumbers we called IDOVR1. And this compound is anti-inflammatory. And the reason we looked at cucumbers was they're well known to be anti-inflammatory. You see pictures of people with, or women with face packs and cucumber rings on the eyes. And they were claimed to be reducing redness, puffiness around the eyes, and people had looked for a long time to identify what it was that made them work. And a lot of groups had looked and haven't found anything. And one of the conclusions was they contained a lot of water, and this was soothing, which we didn't believe. So we had a look at some cucumbers, and we found this molecule, as I said, which is a new molecule, IDOVR1. But it's not in all cucumbers. So this type of cucumber you buy in the UK in supermarkets has almost nothing or nothing at all of this molecule. So it's been bred especially for the British taste. It's very bland, tastes of nothing in particular. It does have a lot of water in it, but it has very little anti-inflammatory activity, whereas some of the older types of cucumbers can have a high level of this anti-inflammatory molecule. But you don't know from looking at the cucumber whether it has a lot of this IDOVR1 or not. So working with an American company, we produced a standardized cucumber extract, which we know contains this anti-inflammatory molecule. And it's anti-inflammatory via a new mechanism, which makes it particularly interesting as a potential new drug for treating, for example, conditions like osteoarthritis, for which there is no cure. Most of the treatments are just painkillers. So this molecule seems to be able to reverse the damage that's done in joints from studies we've done. And it works via a new receptor. So it's a receptor which leads to the production of cytokines that do the damage in the joint, the chronic inflammation, reduces the chronic inflammation and allows the healing process to kick in, we think. So potentially this molecule could be a cure for osteoarthritis and other inflammatory disorders, including potentially Parkinson's and Alzheimer's.
Wow.
We need to work with pharmaceutical companies now to develop the molecule. In the meantime, there's a standardized other molecule which we're very interested in, this molecule called casurine. This came from a plant from Western Samoa originally. We identified it as a new molecule again, and showed that it had the ability to control the immune system, so it made the immune system more active. So it had a protective activity in both cell cultures and in mice, and actually protecting them from various infections. But we were interested particularly in the anti-cancer activity, because that's why the plant was given to us from Western Samoa. It was prescribed to a lady who had breast cancer, and the herbalist said this mixture of plant material will make you well. So that led to us finding casurine. We then did the immune assay, showed it had this immune boosting effect, and went on to mouse studies and showed that this molecule could also reduce the ability of cancer cells to grow in mouse models. So we identified that it activated the immune system in a very safe way. There was no negative effect, no toxicity, and all it does, it activates the immune system and makes it respond to tumour cells, which they should respond to anyway. But usually when you develop a cancer, the immune system is just not responding properly for one reason or another. It can be stress, or the cancer cells can actually inhibit the immune response, but this molecule overrides that inhibition and makes the macrophages and T cells and neutrophils actually respond to the tumour cells and can remove them very quickly. Of course, it doesn't work in 100% of cases, but it seems to work in a lot of cases. We've been very lucky that we found that molecule later on occurred in a honey produced in Wales, and this honey has a standardised level of this molecule, and we've been using it particularly in animal studies, not experiments, if you like. These are animals who have natural tumours where the owners don't want to put them through chemotherapy, radiotherapy. We're working with vets who suggest that perhaps these owners might like to try the honey, and it gives really quite remarkable results in many cases for a wide range of different tumour types, because all tumour types are susceptible to the activity of the immune system. The immune system is what stops cancer cells growing in people normally and in animals, and so activating the immune system can have a very strong anti-tumour activity. So we're getting very interesting activity in animal studies, and it's also giving us a great deal of confidence that this molecule has broad applicability to a lot of different tumour types. And so what we're working on is developing the molecule as a pharmaceutical, so as a drug which can be used by clinicians for giving to people, perhaps in combination with other treatments. But in the meantime, we're getting a lot more confidence on the different types of cancers and how it works by looking at dogs with natural tumours, where the owners actually just want to give them a longer, happier life. And that's often what the owners are content with. The vets may have said your dog has 3 weeks and it can go on for another year and a half and die of something else, and the owners are very happy, the dogs are happy, they seem to live a happy life, tumours seem to disappear in many cases, or they stop growing, and it's all about quality of life. An extra year and a half for an old dog is very important in natural products work, is to get the molecules identified so you know actually what's the activity. So one of the problems with a lot of natural products work is that they're based on studies on mixtures of compounds. So, for example, turmeric extracts or ginger extracts, but they contain tens of compounds, hundreds of compounds, maybe thousands of compounds, and you can't be sure actually what's giving the activity. So what we do is we purify the compounds first, we identify them, fully characterize them, and then we do the biological assays. So that's why we can be sure the cucumber compound has this anti-inflammatory activity by itself, and it seems to be the only compound in cucumber that has anti-inflammatory activity, which is there in significant amounts. Some on the internet, for example, on Google, you'll see that cucumbers contain fisetin that's supposed to be anti-inflammatory, but in fact there's almost no fisetin in cucumbers. So yes, fisetin may have anti-inflammatory activity, but it's not why cucumbers are anti-inflammatory, because there's almost nothing there. Whereas our molecule has strong anti-inflammatory activity, incredibly strong. You need a tiny, tiny dose, just 20 milligrams per day for an anti-inflammatory effect and benefit in osteoarthritis. Whereas with turmeric, you might need grams, and the same with glucosamine, you need grams per day, because they have very low activity or maybe no activity at all. So people suggest you take more and more of them to have a greater effect, but actually with cucumbers, you just need a tiny, tiny dose. And the same with the compound in amino honey, it's extremely effective. It's almost like a homeopathic activity on the immune system. You need almost nothing in the honey just to be able to measure it, and then it can activate the immune system. So they're at very, very low concentrations, which can make the identification and isolation quite complicated, but we're very expert in finding small amounts of very active compounds and then doing biological assays on those. So we know exactly what's giving the activity and the level of activity which those molecules have.
As an educationist, I've been jotting some things down, and firstly, I would like to ask some insights about how we have a health-related information evidence before we start saying all this to the public. Because I would want to go home saying, I had something today. Some types of cucumber has some molecules that support anti-inflammation. Yes. So are there some evidence-based? Like
Yes. Yeah. So what we did was we identified the molecule, showed it had anti-inflammatory activity in, for example, human blood studies and cell cultures. And then we went on to standardize the cucumber extract to greater than 1% of this molecule, IDOBR1. And then we've done clinical studies in moderate to severe osteoarthritis. So we've done 3 of those studies so far. And you can see that this cucumber extract is better than glucosamine and chondroitin, for example, in actually giving improvement to patients who have real osteoarthritis. So, and it gives a tiny, tiny dose, as I said. So a very small amount has quite a strong effect in improving the condition of osteoarthritis patients. So that's the clinical evidence that we have. It's for the extract. What we want to do is go on and actually develop a pharmaceutical which will require the pure compound then being tested as well.
Okay, still on the, do you have a plan to let the government know that this particular one doesn't have as much as the other one, if I understand from your explanation?
Well, it's actually a bit more complicated than that. So there are 4,000 varieties of cucumbers. So this one in the UK certainly is almost always useless, has almost none of the anti-inflammatory activity. But this is what the supermarkets sell, and this is almost the only cucumber that most people can get hold of. In some health food shops in the summer you'll see gherkins or smaller cucumbers, but even those are variable in the concentration of IDOBR1. It seems it's partly variety, but partly also the conditions where it's grown. So many of these cucumbers, for example, will be grown in greenhouses, sometimes in hydroponic systems, very, very artificial growth conditions where they grow fast, but actually they contain nothing of any use. So they look good, but they taste of nothing and they have nothing useful in them. Whereas the smaller ones grown outside, if there's a lot of sunshine, a lot of heat, then they seem to produce higher levels of this compound IDOBR1. So most people are missing the health benefits of cucumbers by being sold the wrong cucumbers. And of course these are very cheap in the UK relatively, but they're not probably very good for you at all. I mean, they probably have no negative effect, but no positive effect either. Population and a very high demand for healthy food products because their health system is not as good. So people are much more focused on trying to cure themselves rather than pay a lot of money.
Platforms, or they are plants that we need to plant and grow, or they come in tablets?
It comes as a patent level of this molecule. Then they dry them essentially, drying an extract which just has a certain level of the particular molecule. So it's just a dried cucumber extract, but with a measured amount of this particular compound. So they're very, very stable molecules.
And then to the honey, what makes this particular one different from the regular honey that we see?
Well, it's this molecule. This molecule we've identified. It's an amino sugar. So you can look at Manuka. It's not there. You can look at various honeys like heather honey, other honeys from around UK. It's not there. You can look at honeys from all around the world. We looked at a lot of different sources of honey and they never contain this molecule. So it's a very rare molecule anyway, and it just so happens that only a small number of plants produce it. So the bees have to visit this plant when it's flowering, collect the molecule and put it into the hives. And that's the only way of getting it into a food material. So the nice thing is it's now in a food. So it's in a honey and it's been in the food chain for a long time, but obviously people didn't know the benefits of the honey. So we select for this particular molecule. And as I said with the animals, we've shown that it has this benefit in dogs, which can be predicted from the cell cultures and the mouse studies, that it has an anti-cancer activity by activating the immune system.
So it has been tested on animals, but has it been tested on humans?
Humans can take it. As I said, it was in the food chain, so we're not giving them anything that hasn't been in the food chain for a long time, but all we're doing is measuring the compound so that we know if someone has a benefit, that it may well be due to the level of the molecule in the honey. So Manuka, for example, has a lot of claims around being good for you, and people will pay a very high price for buying things like this Manuka Farm product from health food shops. But actually it's never been shown in clinical studies to have a real benefit apart from in throat infections. But then any honey has a benefit in throat infections. That's been known for hundreds or thousands of years. And it's partly by contact with the high sugar content of the honey actually stops a lot of bacteria and viruses growing. So any honey can have a similar effect to Manuka, but Manuka's been able to get this story out that it's much better than other honeys. It comes from a particular plant in New Zealand, but actually clinically it's not given any indications that it really has any different effect from any other honey. Apart from in the lab, you can show it has some antimicrobial activities. How they get these activity measurements like 20 plus, 30 plus, 40 plus. The higher the plus, the better it's supposed to be. But all they're measuring is the antibacterial activity in the lab. It doesn't mean that if you eat it, it's necessarily going to have that activity. And any other honey may well have the same activity because bacteria can't grow in high amounts of sugar. And honey has a lot of sugar, so it stops bacteria growing. And that can be the benefit then, the soothing effect on the throat, for example, if you have a cold.
So this is going to be like a two-in-one question.
Mm-hmm.
We all know that honey, some people use it in place of sugar.
Yeah.
This particular honey, can anybody take it? Either you're diabetic or you have any health benefit, or it's still supposed to be used by people that don't take sugar?
Well, the good thing about honey is it's not a refined sugar product. So one of the problems with taking refined sugar is it's been processed to a high level and it's pure glucose, sucrose, fructose. So the advantage of honey is it contains a mixture of different sugars, some large, some small. So actually then the blood sugar goes up more slowly because the body takes some time to release all the glucose from the units in the more complex sugars. So it's a slow release form of sugar. So it is better for you than refined sugar. But if you're diabetic, you obviously need to monitor your blood sugar levels, and diabetics will know whether they can eat honey or not. And most honeys will be the same. So our honey is no different from any other honey. The sugars in there, they'll be slightly different, but they'll all be slow release of glucose.
So is it only immunity that it works on, or it improves the general health of everything?
Well, the immune system is vital for keeping you healthy in all ways. So the immune system fights infections, bacterial, viral, parasites, fights cancers. And so keeping the immune system active and working in a positive way, what they call the type 1 immune response, is actually good for general health. And one of the problems is as you get older, your immune system becomes weaker, and that's why old people become more susceptible to viruses and bacterial and coughs and colds, which can lead to pneumonia and more serious problems. So amino honey has the potential for actually keeping the immune system more active and preventing infections. So it can have a preventative activity, preventing you getting coughs and colds, and which might lead on to more serious problems.
As I said before, I'm 6 this year, so I'm much better health-wise since I've been taking the immuno honey. And it isn't just imagination, it's just that the occasional things that affect older people, I don't seem to suffer from apart from this arthritis. So I should now go and buy 100 weight of cucumbers.
Yes.
It's great stuff, I'd highly recommend it. And I've got friends on it who are really enthusiastic.
Yes. It's great. For therapeutic activity, you really need a pure molecule that's measured.
Have you got anything forwards on this? Because I know the cost.
You'll never get it through NICE. I mean, they do recommend honey for respiratory infections, but you'll never get them to approve a honey, for example, for treating cancer or treating pneumonia or parasite infections. So prevention, maybe you might get them to approve that, but they're always going to say, how are you controlling all the other compounds in the honey? And it's something you just can't do because the bees will collect whatever plants are flowering at that time, what they want to go to. So to go down the NICE route for pharmaceutical, it needs to be a pure molecule. But there are lots of financial hurdles in actually getting it to that level. You need to do you need to do a big human study. You need to produce a large amount of the molecule, which can cost £250,000, for example, just to produce enough of the molecule to do the clinical studies in the first stage. You've got to do toxicology in 2 mammal species.
We'd be delighted, because we are hoping to promote all sorts of businesses in the area. But this one is a lifesaver, really. If only we could break through the hard shell of so many cynical people.
Yes.
But we can only do that by trying. I've got a brother with terminal cancer. I'm working on him at the moment. It certainly won't hurt him.
No, definitely not.
But we're hoping to get a lot of members. It's a trust that Sam set up about nearly 2 years ago. And it's not really what we know, it's who we know, that we can get people like yourself to help out and all sorts of things. So thank you again, Robert. Really appreciated it. It would be great.
Okay, thank you very much for coming, and it's great to have the opportunity to explain what we're doing here in Wales. I think lots of people don't realise there's such interesting work going on in a remote part of Wales. Thank you very much for coming to visit our laboratory. There's a leaflet describing how we discovered the molecule, and then a box of the immuno honey for you to try.